So I think you get a sense of the excitement and the fact that we really are at this hinge moment. Well, Alex, I'll ask you to comment in a minute because you're at the other end of the spectrum here, and you're now working on the clinical trials portion of drug discovery and development. For me, as a head of research and development, this is by far and away the single largest budget item that I deal with. Late-stage clinical development accounts for far more than 50% of the total cost of developing a new drug. Oftentimes it can be 70 or 80% of that cost, depending on the scale of trials that are required. Well, to tee up, Alex, I'd like you to ponder one thing. The randomized clinical trial, which is sort of the gold standard, is exactly 75 years old. So this year. The first randomized clinical trial was published in 1948 in the British Medical Journal, and it was a trial of streptomycin, a new antibiotic that was being tested for tuberculosis, which was untreatable at the time. And there was a famous statistician who'd been agitating to do randomized trials, and he couldn't convince anyone to do it because they felt that it was unethical. Well, there was an extreme shortage of streptomycin. So because of that, they said, well, it's ethical to actually randomize people to getting the antibiotic or getting standard of care. What was standard of care? Bed rest for 6 months and good luck. And the trial had a randomization, it had blinding, it had central review of x-rays, all of the things that we now incorporate in the modern clinical trial. And when you think about it, not much has changed in that 3/4 of a century about how we do these trials. But again, we feel we're on the precipice of a new era and a new way of doing clinical experimentation. And so, Alex, I'd love to get your take on this.
Yeah, Unlearn was crazy enough to try to take on this thing that stood for 75 years, and we've had success. And so fundamentally, the clinical trial hasn't changed. If you want to test an Alzheimer's drug, you find 2,000 people to test it on. 1,000 of them get assigned to the actual treatment. 1,000 of them just sit there and do nothing. And that hasn't changed for 75 years. Well, what if instead you could make a digital twin of somebody that comes into the trial, and then you could, for everyone that gets the treatment, you could have a digital twin that doesn't get the treatment, and that would allow a deeper insight into what happens to somebody during a trial. And now this completely changes what you can do. You could now maybe sign up 1,000 people in total, and 800 of them get assigned to the treatment, and only 200 have to be in the control.